Hi, it's Victor Purton, the Chief Optimism Officer of the Centre for Optimism, and we're here to celebrate the Bendigo Invention and Innovation Festival and the optimism, innovation and invention of the city of Greater Bendigo and its surrounds. And I am absolutely blessed to be joined by someone who I think I've known for about 30 years, Gerard Jose, who is the CEO of the Bendigo Community Health Services. Gerard, great to see you.
And likewise, Victor, it's been too long since we've caught up. So,
as we said, our hair has gone grey in the meanwhile. The first question we ask everyone in this optimism series is what makes you optimistic? And what makes you optimistic, Gerard?
Thanks, Victor. Look, I was probably blessed to grow up in a family in a very small, rural, but strongly multicultural community. Like many others, we grew up without money and all those sorts of things. But as a family and community, we had to be reliant on each other. So that reaching out, caring for each other, sharing food, clothing, shoes, music, creativity was really part of the DNA of our little community. And I think that provided us all with a mindset to care for each other, but also to be positive about the future, despite what adversity would throw at us.
That's absolutely brilliant. I think you've nailed it as well as anyone could. So tell us, with Bendigo Community Health Services, tell us about what it does, how many people it employs, and some of its stories of optimism and innovation.
I was attracted to come to Bendigo Community Health Services because I've been aware of it for so many years. We currently employ about 210 people across 50 different types of services. It's been going nearly 45 years, so it's been around a long time. And it grew up out of Eagle Hawk and Kangaroo Flat, which are, from an area that were very much, I suppose, underrepresented by wealthy incomes or health service provision. So it came out of a need to care for vulnerable people, and that's part of, I think, the core value of the organisation still today. We do work and have our major focus on caring for the most vulnerable and people that really do need those fundamental services, from community services to health services to a little bit of a reach out. But they're also the people as our consumers, our clients and our connection that are probably some of the most generous people you'll ever come across. So I think, for me, Bendigo Community Health Services is a really great fit around being passionate about community building, how to impact communities to be more inclusive and resilient, and maybe to influence a bit further around public policy, which is where you and I first connected. So if you have to look beyond the immediate and to be optimistic about changing conditions over periods of time. So as I said before, it's influencing both the said and the unsaid within a workplace. So we focus as an organisation on futures thinking. We have conversations about mindfulness, above the line behaviour. So it's always focusing on that positive sort of it. But and we actually generated a new value for our organisation, or two new values for our organisation. One's around innovation, and one's about togetherness. But for me, you can't be innovative, you can't be creative if you don't have that curious mindset, and you can't be curious or agile thinker if you're still pessimistic. So you've got to be optimistic to look at the future.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect connection. One of our board members, John Hagel, the head of the Deloitte Centre for the Edge, talks about the passion of the explorer, that curiosity value. And the science, of course, verifies what you say. I mean, pessimists have great difficulty in innovating because they're caught up with what went wrong or who did it, as opposed to sort of the Dyson who claims to have had 5,000 iterations of the vacuum cleaner before he released it to the market. So, you've worked in innovation, you've worked in innovation for a long time, and that's a value. So tell us about, from your perspective, that connection between being optimistic and being innovative.
I think the innovation, if you're genuine about the part of that that part of innovation has to do with a willingness to learn, to explore, look at new opportunities, and have wide-ranging conversations. And I think the Dyson example is brilliant. If we can't try new ways of thinking, try new ways of doing, and failing, I think most of us have learnt more through failure than you learn through success. But it's also then being, as individuals, but as a collective and a team, seeing what the needs are in the community and then reaching out with the community to actually resolve some of those. And I think through this last 4 to 5 months that we're all experiencing globally and nationally, and now within, obviously within our Victorian and regional city context, that I think we're seeing more care and compassion in abundance than we are meanness. And to me, that has to underpin that people can't, I suppose, be kind to others if they're feeling pessimistic. So I take that really broad view that people must be feeling a lot more optimistic about connection with their families, their neighbours, their communities, even in times when they have to stay apart. We can care for others in different ways. And you can look at that at the way Food Bank has responded. And you asked me before, Victor, an example within our service is that we run each year in winter a coat drive for people who are basically cold. So we normally distribute thousands of coats that are donated. This year we couldn't accept those coats because of the COVID and the lack of capacity to get them all dry cleaned and walked out. We've been overwhelmed with donations from people that have given $1 or $5 to those that have given significant amounts, but also from partners that have probably resulted in about $400,000 worth of coats being delivered for us to distribute to those in need. And that, to me, that generosity of spirit has to be with people that are optimistic about how we can support each other now, but also into the future.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the studies show, those who are in the toughest times or those who in fact have little tend to be grateful for what they've got and then generous. In fact, I was talking to Kathy from Food Share earlier today, and she was relating the story of a woman who put $5 donation in, and she'd gone through great suffering and great trauma, but it was her first paycheck getting back into work. And Kathy said, "Look, don't donate." And this woman said, "No, I must. I have to return the favour." So that generosity that you talk about in your community and amongst your clients must inspire you, I think.
Oh, it does, and it is those stories that Kathy shared that we've had some of our clients, and to be quite honest, they don't have spare money at all, but they've gone out and paid coffees forward for some of our staff. That's their way of saying thank you. Doing it, without not wanting thanks, and they're doing it anonymously. They've gone to the coffee shops that they know some of our staff around Eaglehawk or Kangaroo Flat are frequent, and just left money on the counter saying, there's a way of saying thank you. It's a little thank you that they can give. And that probably means so much to us in terms of our cohort of staff to hear all those stories that are coming out, that generosity of spirit and the generosity of people giving. So, Victor, one of the other things I suppose that I wanted to share is I think people are connecting, albeit now through Zoom and other cyber devices, but I think we're connecting and actually talking more about some of those underlying social issues that have impacted us on the past. And as you and I talk about emotional and mental health and well-being, my sense is that we are now talking about how we can actually address the issue rather than blaming the victim. Yeah. That's happening across a range of different things, from domestic violence, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander reconciliation, and the Black Lives Matter. So I think we as a community are seizing the opportunity during ISO to actually reflect on behaviours and attitudes, and maybe being optimistic that we've got some opportunities for developing deeper change in our communities.
Yeah, part of it is having more time. I had a friend in Sydney who works in the mental health area, and her husband suffers from mental health problems. She says, not sitting for 2 hours in a traffic jam every day ruminating has improved his health. But also, we've done a project on what we call the better normal. And we asked 1,000 people over 22 countries, do you see a better normal? Well, 70% of them came back with ways in which their life has improved. And it's exactly as you say, more connection. Funnily enough, News Limited then picked it up. And News Limited did an interview with me, as asked the expert for their readers, and then polled their readers. And what surprised me, maybe my mailing list are overthinking, 85% of News Limited readers said that they could see a better normal for themselves. And part of it is working from home a bit more. Part of it is connecting with family. Part of it is not spending time in traffic jams. So are those the things you're seeing people celebrating?
Oh, definitely. I think they're the obvious signs, though. Even this morning, I was a phone hookup with some staff, and we were sharing, we've got staff like in every workforce in every community that are challenged by health issues. So the actual working from home for us has helped. 3 examples of a person with MS, person with brain cancer, and a person with, almost, I suppose, early onset dementia. They're able to continue working because, yes, as you said, they're not consuming hours of the day in travel. They're not struggling to get around unfamiliar workplaces, or the workplace isn't as sensitive to its needs as it could be. So, and it's helping people work at their peak times, what works for them. So my biggest adjustment is figuring out when people want to be available as well, because I have staff that are starting, at 5 o'clock in the morning, because that's actually a better time for them with family needs. I think flexible working arrangements are well and truly with us. Because us as executive people, we've got to be actually more flexible now in actually accommodating the future, because it's here. And I'm really looking forward to that part of the embedding change. It's everything we've always talked about. We can actually now make it happen. So
yeah, spot on. I mean, my little anecdote is my family was split across the world after World War II. And our biggest family gathering in human memory was 1937, of which there are only about 5 or 6 people still alive who were there. Well, with Zoom, we had the biggest family gathering since 1937. People in Germany, the US, and elsewhere, and I think people are finding that. But let's head back to Bendigo, because you've made the choice to come to Bendigo, and we're celebrating the Invention and Innovation Festival. And one of the things we've been talking about with other people is, the thousands of years of history here of Aboriginal people adapting to the landscape and new foods and new ways of living. And then through the gold rush, the need to bring water and new types of innovation. And in recent decades, Bendigo blooming, as a city of art, as a city of cuisine, a city of wine, of advanced manufacturing. So, moving to Bendigo from elsewhere, how have you found that, this mindset of creativity and invention and innovation?
Thanks, Victor. Look, I really have been privileged to work, live and thrive in many regional communities, towns, cities, and generally most are optimistic. I think, there's 60-odd regional cities around Australia, and all of them have a sense of optimism and futures thinking and self-reliance. But Bendigo really does stand out to me, and I think it's because you can see it in what it does in terms of its community engagement, its civic leadership, its commitment to equity and inclusion are all characteristics, I think, that define optimism. And you can't have a city that's going to thrive in the creative sector, I think, for me, developing infrastructure without a city that's wanting to look at how it has a future set of residential areas and people that are going to be included. And that's why I think I'm attracted to being part of the the Greater Bendigo region, part of its group of people that want to work together, its responsiveness to issues, i.e. the mosque attack a number of years ago, how they turned that into a silver lining, how our staff and staff that have been refugees themselves responded to the racism and now are reaching out to over 82,000 people across the region with a message about connection, care, and are being universally, I think, acknowledged for their great compassion. So I really think Bendigo it's an optimistic, but it's a creative city, and it's one that I think is founded on compassion and care.
It's a brilliant point you make in respect of refugees. I mean, some studies have shown that refugee youth in Australia are actually far more optimistic than the native born, and that, you know, ability of refugee communities to settle right across regional Victoria and thrive, and to help the local community thrive, is just a fantastic message, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And to see some of our young people from, you know, South Sudan, Afghani, Karen, you know, what they've been through before they've got to, you know, the city of Bendigo, Greater Bendigo. So I think I shudder to think how I or my family, my children would have survived what they've done, and to still arrive full of their optimism, their hope, their wanting to be involved. And I think I shared, we've got some of our young people making videos in their language, whether it's Dari or Dinka, to actually welcome other refugees to the city of Bendigo. That to me says it all.
So powerful. It's just something that I did a radio interview myself. I was interviewed, and the interviewer said, "Oh, look, this must be the toughest time that Australian business has ever had." And I said, "Well, look, sure, it's the first time you've ever had a forced shutdown of the whole business sector. But on the other hand, we have refugees who've come here whose businesses have been blown up or destroyed or expropriated, and migrants who've gone through the same process. And then, of course, you've got Australians whose businesses have been burnt out or flooded out." And, you know, I think one of the things that strikes me about the current narrative on television, it's so focused on the leader, you know, be it the Prime Minister or the Premiers or the like, and not sharing enough of those stories of resilience, you know, of the people who are in Australia who've been refugees and migrants. And as you know very well, I mean, you can't be resilient unless you're optimistic, believing in a better future. So if we can get more of their messages of resilience out to the general community, I think the stronger we'll be.
I think, and without shouting out to ABC, one of my favourite shows on there is Backroads, because I think backroads actually are the highways to very healthy communities. And any community that's, I think, exposed through backroads really shows that real depth of passion, care, thoughtfulness, I suppose, that embraces everybody that's part of the community and generates their own sense of future through basically optimism. So that's not to say, you know, we're not Pollyanna about it, but I think there are undercurrents of change that are coming our way. But I think if you're optimistic, you can actually look at the scenarios for the future and plan around them. So yes, things will change, but I believe we can reset where we are now. And the other thing I'm seeing is that people are less materialistic than they were, and they're actually thinking about how can we engage more kindly, more gently, reduce our footprints, you know, both on the world and on our community. And I love the examples of Help Your Neighbour campaigns that are, I suppose, underwriting, the last 4 months, but I'm like you, the communities have gone through flood, fire, drought, and tough journeys. They're going to be here beyond COVID, and we've got to be able to be in a capacity to embrace them and help them on their journeys for change as well.
So come back to your clientele. So, you know, you're an optimist yourself.
Yep.
You're lifting people. You're harnessing their own positivity. One of the figures that bewilders me about Australia is that we have the second highest rate of medication for depression in the world. Well, what do you think is that story? Is that over medication? What's happening on that front that you're seeing in the health field?
Um, I think, unfortunately, Victor, that to me is one of those generational stats. I remember back in the 80s at the YMCA, back in Heidelberg days, where there was a lot of campaigns even then, I think, around the amount of adult medications being prescribed in Australia. You know, they're worried about the illegal drug and substance usage, but it was more the legal usage. And I think that's something that I would share a concern that maybe we've got to rethink our practice and get a better balance between prescription and meditation and mindfulness, that, you know, to move from that reliance on the drug to reliance on looking at your body and your mind differently, and changing that mind, changing your mindset.
Brilliant. You know, meditation, I think all of the evidence says that you can actually change the shape of your brain by meditating 5 or 6 minutes a day. So meditation, mindfulness, being in nature, sharing photos of beauty. So what do you, I mean, coming back to you personally, and then I'll go back to the bride again, you know, you have to work hard, you're in a tough environment, you're leading through a pandemic. What is it that fills your well of optimism that you can share with other people? As an infectiously optimistic leader, it can be tiring. What is it that fills your well that you can share it with others so effectively?
Yeah. Thanks, Victor. I think it's on a number of levels. I've been fortunate to been exposed to meditation 20 odd years ago. I would probably confess I don't practice it daily as I should. And that's one of the opportunities, I think, through ISO that I should be utilising. If I'm not travelling 45 minutes to work each way, then I should be putting at least 5 minutes of that time each day into a bit more meditation. I think I was reflecting when this first started, I was almost in that sense of being highly anxious about what was happening. You know, the pandemic was sweeping, concerned about its impact on our clients, our communities, worried for about, obviously, my family and family members and colleagues. I could have sat in that anxiety, and for me, the creative response was, how do I communicate more to staff, especially as we're now all in lockdown? So I started writing to the staff and producing, I think when we first started, almost a daily bulletin to staff, just to make sure we could refocus on caring for self, caring for others, and sharing and understanding that this is normal, that emotions are normal, and putting people into contact with each other. Then moving to, I suppose, helping teams bump in and bump out with each other on a daily basis and checking in. You know, we don't do enough of that. Just checking in, you know, that "Are you okay?" day needs to happen every day. So for me, to write is something I love to do anyway, whether it's writing to staff, a bit of poetry. You can't write unless you're being creative. You can't be creative unless you touch that wellspring of optimism and kindness. So for me, that's what re-energizes me. Every time I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed or worn out, then I'll start writing again. And that, I think, is part of that calming influence, and it re-energizes your focus on what is in the horizon that you think we can aim at, rather than get overwhelmed by the day-to-day. So, but it requires practice. And I think it's with yourself, but speaking kind words, being kind to yourself, understanding your faults. And the older I've got, the more faults and foibles I've found. One of the big things I think I'm sharing with staff is trusting our colleagues to do the right thing. Being willing to receive more feedback about your impact on others, impact that's healthy and impact that's not as helpful. So looking at your blind spots. One of the most important things that I think that this period is really re-energised, is standing up and speaking out when messages of hate or violence are being shared within the community. And you were talking about some of the media focus. Some of that media focus is focusing on the negative energy and rather than putting it into the positive. And that means, for me, removing myself from toxic people. Look for the opportunities to educate, but you don't need to waste your energy with the toxic. And I think the simplest things are, practicing kindness, but making progressive changes. That little bit of self-discipline, reading that book, doing that little bit of meditation. For me, exploring cooking a bit more over this period of time. I've got more time to do a bit more creative cooking. Make something. And for all our daughters and sons out there, tidy up your bedroom occasionally. That little bit of self-discipline would achieve a lot. So they're the sorts of things that I suppose I'm enjoying and connecting with people. Mind you, like others, I'm probably a bit sick of Zoom and Teams and everything else and FaceTime and Messenger. But it's what we've got at the moment, and aren't we lucky that we have it?
I was talking to someone, a CEO from the United Kingdom, and he said 3 months ago he was a dinosaur. He had never used video conferencing in his life, and he hopped on planes to every country he had to go to, and now he is a whiz. And he said, look, I'm talking to you from England to Australia. Yeah. What a miracle. So it is a miracle. So you've been doing this for decades. You are infectious. You do lift people. What do you find are the most effective tools you give to other people? Is it the notion of gratitude? Is it meditation? What's the message on becoming more optimistic and more positive that you find resonates most with the people that you're influencing?
I think the three things that I think that we share, within leadership roles or conversational roles is, that I think the meditation is one. People doing that, but it's how you can do that as a collective as well. I've always shared that people on whatever journey, keep that journey, what do you want to say to yourself today? What do you want to read that you've said to yourself in 10 years' time? What are those life lessons and observations? And very much the third thing for me is, as a team, as a collective of people, what's your common focus? And I said before, what's the above-the-line behaviours that you as a group want to be known for? Is it that kind word? Is it including people? Is it reaching out? Or for some people, just sharing birthdays is something that a team really wants to focus on. Whatever it is that is the magic for that group, articulate it and hold it dear.
So last month, the Health University in Austria did a study on sleep and optimism. And they concluded that optimists have far better sleep, far fewer sleep problems, far fewer chronic sleep problems. And actually concluded from their study that optimists sleep better, but sleep makes you more optimistic. But that's one piece of the science. The really interesting thing that they said is that the most effective intervention to help people become more optimistic is the better self concept, or my best self, which the American military now uses. So you sit down for 15 minutes and imagine yourself 6 months hence or 12 months hence or a year's hence. And that visualization is so powerful in terms of helping you to reach that point. So my question to you regarding Bendigo Community Health, as you look 6 months hence, 12 months hence, 20 years hence, what do you think it's going to look like? What do you think it's going to be doing?
I think Bendigo Community Health's DNA around a compassionate scope of practice, inclusion for all, and I think capturing all members of the community, not just the wealthy, unhealthy, but let's look at every member of our community is so precious and important to us that we include all. That to me will be here. As because I think needs are going to be around for, unfortunately, decades to come. And if the health needs have been, I suppose, achieved, then we're there to do that community building, that connection. The things that I think make a community healthier and stronger are all those factors around connection, knowing your neighbours. And that's something I think, Victor, that I hope every country in the world, people have got to know their neighbours in different ways. That's what Bendigo Community Health should be known for, how we actually engage with all members, how we support community building activities of others. We just don't do it by ourselves. And that, to me, comes back to that role of civic leadership, that we're there to work with Mayor Margot Rourke, Craig Neiman, the CEO, but all the other public sector and big agencies in town and small agencies in town that do such amazing work. Let's have our own informal agreements about how we work collaboratively together to achieve better outcomes for everyone.
Yeah, Margaret O'Rourke said to me, the mayor, that it's one of the few cities where you can ring the people of influence up and get them together within an hour, if there's a problem to solve. And what I love is that, she's an optimist. The CEO of the council is an optimist. People like Paul Chapman heading up the Innovation and Invention Festival, solidly optimistic. And the people running Food Share, it's just mind-bogglingly positive as to what they're doing. So, thinking along those themes, what's a final message you'd want to give to the people of Bendigo, both leaders and followers, and that you'd to celebrate that optimism and innovation?
I think that our emerging leaders are the ones that we should all look to with enthusiasm. And I'm really just taking that we have some wonderful young emerging leaders in both in our organisations, within our youth council, within our services, and that their creativity in connecting knowledge, ideas, services, messages, and I suppose communities of interest are the most important thing that we can help support. At our stage of careers and community participation, I think, to me, it's more important that we support those emerging, that their passion to give is more important than my passion to give. So I look forward to working and supporting and learning from those young people. That, to me, is the most important thing for the city of Bendigo, that vision building, advocacy for the future is now in the hands of some amazing, amazing young people, and let's harness them and embrace them for what they're giving.
Well, I can imagine you're still going to have a career for the next 30 years or so, so I can't see you passing from the scene too quickly. So, look, Gerald, thank you so much. It is so wonderful. You've had such a rich career already, and to see you settling in, enjoying both the challenges and the pleasure of Bendigo. Thank you for joining us on this optimism conversation. We wish you the best. And my last question is, if people want to get involved, to help you, to volunteer, to donate, what's the best way to do that?
I'll go straight to website, bchs.com.au. So we're there, and we love engaging with people, sharing stories, and helping each other. That's what it's about, not just them helping us, but how we can work with them as well. Victor, likewise, it's so much a pleasure to connect with someone who is enthusiastic and optimistic about the future and the current. And, I think between us all, Bendigo is only going to thrive and survive.
What a beautiful final message. Thanks very much, Gerald. Thanks to you, the audience. Please, passionately get involved. Ask yourself the question, what makes you optimistic? And then, go to Gerald's website and see what you can do to help, to volunteer, and to support their great work. Thank you.